pale skin, snotty expression. You're a Breton, the masters of Magicka, right? You're nothing but a stuck-up harlot with cheap parlor tricks. Go ahead, try your Magicka in here. Let's see you make those bars disappear. No? What's the matter? Not so powerful now, are you, Breton? You're not leaving this prison till they throw your body in the lake. Oh, that's right. You're going to die in here, Breton. You're going to die. Hey, you hear that? The guards are coming. For you.
Lock that door behind us.
Yes, sir. My sons, they're dead, aren't they?
We don't know that, sire. The messenger only said they were attacked.
No, they're dead. I know it.
My job right now is to get you to safety. What's this prisoner doing here? This cell is supposed to be off limits.
Usual mix-up with the watch.
Never mind. Get that gate open. Stand back, prisoner. We won't hesitate to kill you if you get in our way.
No sign of pursuit,
Stay
sir.
put, prisoner.
Good. Let's go. We're not out of this yet.
You. I've seen you. Let me see your face. You are the one from my dreams.
Please, sire, we must keep moving. Better not close this one. There's no way to open it from the other side.
Looks like this is your
This
lucky
doesn't
day.
concern you, prisoner.
Stay out of our way. Stand aside, prisoner.
Close up left. Protect the Emperor.
Captain's down! Take them down! Don't try anything.
I'm right, Sire. We're clear for now.
Captain Reno?
She's dead. Sorry, sire, but we...
Who will help an old beggar?
Hi, Rosan is a captain.
I've heard he'll teach his skills for the right price.
The Emperor and his 3 sons dead, right under the noses of the Imperial Guard. It's a disgrace.
How are you?
Been better. How about
Anyone
you?
looking for work should consider
I've
the
been
fighters.
better.
Discount spells. I'd just as soon buy a slightly used
Good
shield.
morning. I hear you.
Anyone looking for work should consider the Fighters Guild. I hear they're always looking for recruits.
Fine.
What?
What kind of deal can I make for you? Have a look at my wares. I'm sure there's something to suit you. I appreciate your bid. Goodbye. Please, come again.
Have mercy.
Bother me. Go away.
Just one.
Greetings.
Flying in the sky. How are you today?
Hello. Hello. Let's hear it.
You have the hands of an illusionist.
spare a coin for the infirm?
Greetings.
Over here!
Stand. Good luck. It's a brave thing you're doing. I'm just warming up, you pathetic worm! Why won't you? I'm just warming up, you pathetic worm! This is the part where you fall down and bleed to death! This ends here! What's the matter? Getting tired? Thank the Nine. Captain.
It's all over, Lord. Then pay. Where are you? Where? She was here a second ago. She was here a second ago. Where are? Where? She was here. Where are? Where? She was here. She was here a second ago. Where are? Where are you? She was here a second ago. Where are you? Where are? She was. Where are? She was here a second ago. Where are you? Where are you?
Dear penis.